Chaco Canyon, Its Origins, People, and History by G.B. Cornucopia. And it's the first in a series of 3 lectures we're calling the Chaco Phenomenon. The second lecture in this will be the Chaco Culture, Its Influence, Outliers, and Decline, and that'll be held again next Friday here, same time, same place. And that'll be, that lecture will be given by Tori Myers, and she is now the director of the Salmon Ruins Museum and the Ruins of Great House down in outside of Bloomfield, New Mexico. The third lecture in this series is going to be called Chimney Rock Great House and the Chaco Regional System. And this will be, Chaco, Chimney Rock's connection with the Chaco culture and the extent of that. And that'll be held on Friday, 2 weeks from now, here in the same place at 6 o'clock. And that will be given by Susan Ryan, and she is the Executive Vice President of a Research Institute of Chaco Canyon Archaeological Center in Cortez, Colorado. And if if you guys have not heard of that, look into it. It's a fabulous place, that Chaco Canyon Archaeological Center. And we have a couple more lectures we do have one more scheduled, and that is going to be in September, and it's going to be Wednesday, the 24th of September. It's going to be here at the Fellowship Hall again at 6 o'clock. And that is going to be, it's called The Peregrines of Chimney Rock. It's a tale of despair turned to triumph. And it's by author and wildlife biologist. Her name is Marcy Houle. And the background story with Marcy is back in the early 70s, when they were doing a lot of work out at Chimney Rock, things were going, a lot of activity out there. And then they discovered a pair of nesting peregrine falcons up on Companion Rock, which is next to Chimney Rock. And because of, at that time, they were the most endangered species, one of the most endangered species in the world. They had to shut everything down, and they brought in a biologist, a young woman, a biologist, this Marcy Houle, and she studied them for 3 years, went through a lot of tribulations. I think they burned her trailer. And there was big plans to develop over there at Chimney Rock and so on. And she wrote the book. We do have it, it's for sale out at the site out at Chimney Rock. It's called Wings for My Flight. But anyway, she is called, and she is going to come in and give a lecture on that. And that is going to be, like I said, Wednesday, September 24th. And the other one that's on the horizon, haven't really set the date yet, is Dr. Kim Melville, a very renowned archaeoastronomer. He's figured out a lot of things out at Chimney Rock. And he's going to come in and give another lecture on the major lunar standstill. All right.
But when is it going to be on?
We don't know. I haven't set the date up.
I mean, soon or like?
Well, it's going to be. We have 3 more major lunar standstill events happening. We're going to have one on the 13th and 14th of September. It'll be out at the. And if you guys are interested. You might want to sign up for that. The first one on the 13th, I think, is already sold out. How many tickets are there?
There was 150, Lace.
Yeah, so one of them is already sold
Yeah,
out.
so the Saturday night one's already sold out. There's a flyer back there by the donation
And
box.
free MLS stickers back there. If anybody
Yeah,
would
right
like
by
to
the
pick one up.
donation box. But anyway, then they I guess they just decided, Forest Service, that they're going to have another one October 11th.
Oh, good.
So, and that, I think it's a little earlier. It's going to be more illumination. I think it's about 75% illumination of the moon. So that'll be worthwhile. All that's going to be out at the site. But Dr. Melville is going to come in the Friday before these events, either in September or October. So, and by the way, too, this will be the last of the MLS major lunar standstill for this season. So next time is 18.6
years from now.
No, it'll be
Well,
minus 3.
Minus,
Oh, yeah,
No,
come
so
on,
it's
minus.
15 point something now, so, some of us aren't gonna be around. Okay.
We hope.
Oh, and, before we start there, what I'm gonna do, I wanna pass this around, and, let me get it set up here. And there's two sheets here. I wanna pass it around. Just how did you hear about this? Like posters or social media, radio, and I want everybody to check it so we can get also a head count of how many attended. Yeah, so we do that. And then the second sheet here, everybody look at that. And I just asked you where you came from to tonight. You know, did you come local from Pagosa Springs, which most of you have, but some of you might have come from Andacio and so on and so forth. All right? So we'll pass this around. And everybody check it so we can get a good head count of how many are here.
Better not mix up our papers here.
Oh. Let me see. All right. Our speaker tonight is G.B. Cornucopia. And G.B. served as a National Park Service as an interpretive ranger at Chaco Canyon for 33 years, retiring in February 2022. He remains an interpreter of Chaco culture, loves to share the canyon as a contact for reconnecting modern people to the natural world, especially to the natural rhythms of the sun, moon, and stars. And he began what would evolve into Chaco Night Sky program by attracting Chaco visitors with his telescope at the campground there. Okay. And GB also initiated solar equinox and sunrise programs at the canyon, helped arrange for local Pueblo dance groups to perform in association with these events, thereby helping honor traditions across time and culture. He presently serves as an unpaid consultant to an educational outreach program for NASA's Punch satellite system, launched in last March to study the space between the sun and earth for deeper understanding of solar wind. The theme of the outreach program is ancient modern sun watching and draws on the astronomical traditions of the 8 peoples of the ancient Southwest. So let's hear it for GB. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, you already told them about that.
MLS.
The MLS and that. Their handouts are over there.
All right. Welcome. Thank you all for showing up. And I really want to tout volunteers in parks and national monuments. They are the lifeblood of the place. They really are the ones who take it over and who really know it well. And the Korea group, I've been involved with them on the periphery for many, many years now. And they're a wonderful group, and they deserve a huge amount of thanks for all that they do. So thank you all of you who are members of Korea. Now this is a little bit different for me. I had to move out of my comfort zone a little. I'm not saying a word about astronomy. This isn't about astronomy. But I want to make sure that people can see our pictures, so if I get in your way, let me know, okay? I'll try to move around. I am not a researcher. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not even a highly scientifically trained teacher. I am an interpreter. As such, I spent 34 years working and living in Chaco as an interpretive ranger because Chaco was so much to me, a job, home, and a place where I've spent more time than any other place in my life. This presentation will perhaps be more personal than academic. The charge given to me by Ernie is to present the overall history of the people who created Chaco, where they came from, their ascendance into what has been called the Chaco phenomenon, their subsequent decline, and where they have gone. Do you have a couple of years that we can talk about this?
Do we get meal breaks?
What's that?
Do we get meal breaks?
Only potty breaks. All right. I don't even have my slide title up yet. There we go. Okay. Here I feel the need to let you in on what interpretation is to me. It is not explaining things and telling the only story there is. Good interpretation is telling stories to which the audience can relate, but hopefully can also expand their awareness. It must carry accurate information, but not get lost in lists and dates and such. And Chaco is full of stories. But for the visitors, it's easy to get lost in the grandeur of Bonito or Casa Rinconada. You seem empty today, except for other visitors. So more than anything else for me, Chaco is people. The visitors today, the ancient people, the descendants. Most of this presentation will focus on the material culture and what we do our best to learn from all of that. However, keep in mind that everything we are talking about, and you probably know this, is the hearts and minds of people. At the end of our time together, we will see the people themselves as they demonstrate through cultural memory the current lifeblood of Chaco. First and foremost, let's get these misconceptions out of the way. They still have traction in much of the public, and I don't believe a single one of them. There's nothing true about that. Not a bit. A full understanding of Chaco has yet to be told. It shouldn't surprise us when viewing the extraordinary features that we associate with Chaco and how they almost seem out of place in such an austere environment. We begin with a feeling of awe and wonder at what they did and why it all came to be. With only oral traditions that hang in the air of Chaco from their many descendants to fully explain Chaco, it might be a lost cause. The indigenous people associated with Chaco's story are rich and varied in their expressions of their relationships with the area. Researchers are also guided by their feelings and assumptions based on their worldviews. And the earlier people from the dominant culture had little understanding of the traditions of the people whose physical culture they were collecting and trading in. Well-meaning institutions and their people oftentimes ran roughshod over the desires of the people actually related to the cultures of Chaco. Here we are, group of people. And I'm going to come back to this, but for me, Chaco is still being lived out the way it was being lived out 1,000 years ago. We don't understand why and all of that, but we do know this. Most people who made use of it did not live there. There was a group who did, caretakers, maybe park rangers, I don't know. So, I am going to dig down into 3 different places. Because, as I said, if I just tell the story as I described it, as Ernie asked me to do it, we wouldn't see anything in detail. So we're going to miss a lot of stuff, but we have to get down into some of the weeds to get some of the information. So there's going to be 3 places: Shibikashi village, so-called, and we'll talk about that. The word village may or may not be adequate. Basket Maker 3 site. We're also going to take a look at Bonito itself, the largest, most excavated of the buildings. It's the one that's been studied the most. Over 100 years of excavations have occurred there and many other kinds of studies, and they continue to today. But how did it evolve? Does that tell us something? Is it a single building? Is it a process over many different people's lives? It seemed that it was built on for 300 years. 300 years, longer than my country has been in existence. Each phase might tell us something different. So we're going to look at that. And then we're finally going to come to the descendants. They're the real people. They're the ones who really tell us what Chaco is about. There was always an edge between the official story that has been documented about Chaco and the living memories of the actual descendants. So the misconceptions that we looked at, I really do want to get those out of the way. I am chronically drawn to YouTube presentations about Chaco. I can't help it. I'll be looking at something else, for something else, and they'll be, oh, Chaco. I know. You know, I don't care what it is. Some are excellent. I see lectures and films that illustrate aspects of Chaco that are well presented, sometimes by the researchers themselves. Some are more oriented to indigenous representations, with the people themselves telling their stories. And some are god-awful and are embarrassing to view. I myself have ended up being interviewed in more than one I considered a dubious presentation at best. All right, let's keep going here. Uh-oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. What is that? Sure, I'll go in there. There we go. The Chaco world. Get out of the way here. That's what we represent today, is our understanding of the spatial dimensions of Chaco. Covers huge areas, 60, 70,000 square miles, extends into 4 United States. Every little dot, every little square, every little triangle, great house, great kiva, small houses, the attendant features that we see in all the Chaco places in the canyon as well as outside. However, in the canyon, it's much closer together. There's Chaco, a small part of the world. It seems, in terms of the great houses, it starts here, but that's not necessarily where Chaco began. And we may never know that, but there are some clues. Those outliers, those places, 60, 70,000 square miles, connected with roads and stairways inside and out of the canyon. So this seems like a system. And that's important, to think about it as a system. And we'll come back to that. These are my favorite stairways in the whole canyon. They're not most extravagant. The Jackson Stairway is the one that always garners attention, 100 feet straight up the cliff. Not these. Now, I'm going to try to do this in such a way I can explain to you where we are. We're at the west end of Chaco on the north side, and we're looking basically to the east. This is actually the south side of the canyon, but the directions are a little skewed here because the canyon doesn't run perfectly east and west. The Chusca's there, Penasco Blanco right up there, and these are stairways, a part of a road that goes to a Badlands area called Axistlapa. A lot of roads went into there, and as far as I know, there's never been found any structures, but it was a place they went to. These stairways are not necessary. I wish I had a picture of a person standing on them. You can walk around those are easy. But if you're going to stay on that straight road that comes down off of Penasco Blanco, across the canyon, and then up here, goes to Axistlapa, you've got the stairways. Now, that's either somebody doing it because they were forced to, because it's stupid, or it's devotional. You can make a claim either way. We don't know for sure. There's not a lot of evidence of the kind of coercion that we often think of in Chaco itself, but there is in the Southwest, of course. So, Chaco has 4 very specific seasons, no question about it. The best time to go is the fall. How many of you have been to Chaco? Okay. How many of you are planning on going soon? I am. I'll be there next week. Well, the fall is the best time, so you have time to plan. And I highly recommend it. Go to Chaco. But if you're there in the winter, yeah, it can be very cold. Historical low, sometime in the 60s, I think, was 38 below. I was there in the 90s when it got to 37 below. And we were all pushing for 2 more. Come on, we want the record. We didn't get it. I'm convinced somewhere in the canyon, it's 38 below. The canyon is cut by a wash through the center of it, as most canyons are. Mostly dry, around most of the year. But there are summer rains, monsoons, we're still in that now. And winter runoff. There's a great watershed that brings water into the canyon. So we do know that the bottom of the canyon has changed dramatically. 3 days before this picture, I took this one from the same place. 3 days. It does that sometimes. And so this is an austere environment. You either have too much or too little. It's very seldom right on. And this is what the people dealt with 1,000 years ago. The climate isn't much different. Yeah, the ecology of the canyon floor, yeah, that's changed a lot. But not the climate. This is the fellow that introduced us to Chaco, the prominent culture on the planet anyway. 1849, he rode through the canyon with a bunch of soldiers. He was an excellent observer. So his descriptions are very good. No photographs, though that there were sketch artists, a couple of brothers called the Kern brothers, Edward and Richard, and they took some of these. I hope you can see those over there. I want to get to these two because these are actually, this is tetrao cattle. Not bad, considering that they were on the ground looking at this, and they were only there less than 24 hours. They got some interviews inside the buildings, inner views. There's Bonito. Not too bad, considering. So that was all put into the congressional record, and things slowly started garnering attention. Something about Chaco, people like William Henry Jackson, photographers coming in, all of that. All right. Now we're going to get to where we first see people in Chaco. Go back to what we're talking about here. Current estimates that the first people in the Americas usually settled about 16,000 years ago. Tantalizing evidence suggests it's longer, probably is. We should stay tuned. It's debated how and when the first arrivals showed up. Land bridge theories as well as coastal migration ideas hold the honors for the two most prominent routes, with the time still being discussed. How many of you have heard the phrase for the United States, or the geology of the United States, called Turtle Island? Yeah, I just heard that recently again. All right, that's just an aside that I'm not going to explain.
Not fair.
All right, back in the Chaco area, the first signs of human interaction have been dated to about, and I do mean about, 9,300 BC, based on hunting tools and mobile camps. Paleo-Indians is the tag given to these people. In 5,500 BC, we see more activity by people now called archaic. Are they the same? There does seem to have been, a long time ago, when all the big animals were here and being hunted, when the animals were hunted out, there seemed to be people leaving, going more eastward, and then other people showing up in Chaco. But we don't know. Could be some leftovers too. We have no idea. There's not enough evidence for this. All right. Transitional archaic basket maker. There's no, don't need to get into that. These are the dates, 1800 to 800. And we see remains of basketry, cordage, soft cradle boards. Rabbit fur robes, maize was being grown. Maize had been around for a long time by that time. Deer, pronghorn, and bison were major food sources, and we see it in Atl Cave. It's not really a cave. It's like a sharp overhang that provided shelter for people who would come and stay there for a while. Their activities, as I just read, were like everybody else's. The rock art is very different. This is the earliest stuff in Chaco. It's wild compared to what came later. I'll get out of the way here. Okay, these are pictographs. There's not too many of them, and I don't know anywhere else in the canyon where you'll see these. But it's at this place that seems to have been a shelter place for people who were following the season, following the game, and yet throwing a few seeds into the ground. I love these things. All right, now we get to basket maker 2, AD to 400. Now we're across some divide that you think means something. Increase in the regional population, slab line storage pits were built, and squash was cultivated, the beginning of the Three Sisters. Groundstone tools increased with trough and flat metates and long monos. However, the population of Chaco was small. Only 28 sites from this period have been found. Here's one of them. It's a nice floor, and you got a slab-lined wall around you, and you can cover it over. Not too difficult if you've got the materials to do it. And now you have a shelter. Here's the big one now. This is where major cultural change occurred. And this is where a lot of the debate is about what that means. Basket Maker 3. I love it. Actually, it was Richard Wetherell who gave that name to some of the people before he was seeing places of a lot of pottery. So, I'm going to read this. Bow and arrow and pottery were introduced. Beams were added. So now we have the Three Sisters. Pit houses with attached stone-lined storage rooms allowed year-round occupation of the canyon, and the population increased. Shibikashi village on Chakra Mesa is typical. I want to quote that again. Typical of this time period, but with an atypical prototype Great Kiva. A number of Basket Maker 3 villages sites have been found with as many as 20 pit houses clustered together. People lived in the same location for generations. Basket Maker sites have been found under later structures, 6 under Bonito. There's a little more elaborate pit house. Now, that description that I just read was okay, but not the interpretation. The site was excavated in 1927 first by Frank Roberts. And it was very easy for him to recognize the site as a site type that he'd seen before in the Southwest. He knew that it was from the same time period, but he didn't know what that time was. He could not date these sites. Shibikashi was not dated by Frank Roberts. He could do relative dating, and this has some consequences. All right. Obviously, as people could rely on agriculture for more of their needs, they would settle down and increase their numbers. Simple. Maybe too simple. It's noted that corn had been introduced long before, and the diet itself was as abundant as after the Basket Maker 3 structures. Different, they didn't have the Three Sisters yet, but they had plenty of nutrition through hunting, through gathering, through the things that they were doing. So it's hard to think of farming itself as the trigger. But let's explore this place a little bit. Here's where Shibikashi is. You can see it at the east end of the park. Bonito's there, not because it was there at the time that we're talking about, but it just shows you the layout of the canyon. But then there's another pit house village up here at the northwestern corner near Peñasco Blanco, 29 SJ 423. Not as well known as Shibikashi, not as well studied, but it seems like the same kind of thing that we're looking at. Okay. Okay, the site was first excavated in the 20s, then looked at again in the 1970s by the Park Service. 2 studies in the late 1980s, and then again in 2012, have given rise to the ongoing debate as to how Shibikashi fits into an understanding of Chaco's origins. We can date it now. That's a big thing. But what are we seeing here? Here it is, on a promontory above the canyon floor. Try to get out of your way here. Okay, good. Found some pit houses in the arroyo. It's interesting where it is because it's where the canyon comes together, and so any water flow might be easier to manage in terms of it pooling up and playing around with it. Okay, and we know there's farming that's going on around there. Not big fields, nothing gigantic, nothing like what would, house thousands of people, hundreds of people even. Now here are the 2 maps that I want to show you. The newest one here, using LiDAR, all the latest technology that can tell us what it is. This is Robert's map. First time I went up there with our archaeologist, Dabney Ford, she and I took Robert's map up there. It took us 30 minutes to orient that map because we could see some of the stuff that he didn't that's exposed now. It took us a long time to figure out exactly how to arrange that map, but we finally did it. But you can see there's a lot more there than Roberts knew. Here's one of the things that made him think that perhaps the place was being abandoned, but he couldn't be sure. He saw a lot of rebuilding in places. And he could do the relative dating. He knew that this was a newer section here, this was a newer building, using some of the older buildings, part of it as its support. Does this show that they abandoned the place for a while, then came back and built more? He thought maybe, but he couldn't substantiate that. But as time passed, Shibukishi just became known as this transitional place. The Neolithic demographic transition. Isn't that a great phrase? Neolithic demographic transition. It means more people showed up. And they were doing different things too, of course. But the site just became sort of understood, not too much thinking about it, as one of these sites where it grew in population, people lived there year round and on and on and on. Nothing is ever quite as simple as we'd like it to be sometimes. Now here's all the sites that have been from this time frame documented in and around the canyon, okay? And it's important, I don't know if you can read this, but it says Basket Maker 3 site components. That's real important. You look at a site like this and you think, oh, Basket Maker, look at all these Basket Maker sites. Wow, must be a lot of people. A component might be nothing more than a metate, a lithic scatter, some tools, some cordage, something. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate. And so, when they document those sites and put them on a map, boy, it looks crowded, like a lot of people. Here's a larger area. Same thing, all right? So it's not really that revealing except to tell you the space that they lived in. But the uses of these places are still very, very controversial. And Chip Wills and his group, who did the last study in 2012, I'm going to go a little bit further here with the pictures. Yeah, go back to this. Suggested something a little bit different. And they did a lot more studies than I can tell you about here. They did the hydrology, they did all kinds of studies at this place, at Shibukishi. But in order to, instead of thinking of these as two villages that grew in size, Chip Wills and his crew have suggested, there's no proof, but suggested another story. Their story is possibly, this is all one settlement. And these are activity centers, yes, but they're not villages in the regular way we think about villages. These were places where people were using every strategy they could. Go out and hunt, gather, plant a few seeds, do all of that. But they need activity areas where they can do it. Chaco is very sparse. There's never been any evidence at all that this was the breadbasket of anybody's world in the last 1,000 years, certainly. It's just wild to think that way. And here's what I find interesting, because if we look at all of the studies, and we don't have time to do all of that, during this time frame that we're talking about, way up north, a lot more resources, and a lot of fighting. Where places have a lot of resources, they collect a lot of people who then argue and fight and have disagreements. And that was going on during this time, but Chaco is a backwater. Nobody competed in Chaco. Nobody said, hey, we better get down there and raid those folks. They got a lot. They got nothing. There's just a few of them. Are they the same group? Do they speak the same language? Well, we don't know that. This is far enough back that if indeed Chip Will's idea that this was a single settlement, I shouldn't say it's just his idea, there's a lot of people involved in that idea, but if this is a single settlement, it could have been one group, but we don't know. And we always come back to that. we get to the place of where we can see human activity, but we can't necessarily tell you what it was about or who was doing it. So that's a part of the deep down inside of dear old Shabikishu. So I can't tell you much more than that, because not much more is known. But hopefully these studies will be, further, there'll be more of them. But I just want to make this point. Thinking about Chipwell's idea, because I had not heard that before I read that paper, which came out in 2012. This is the same group of people, a single village, and those strategies, having places where they would bring their activities together and work together to produce food or whatever it might be. That could be the strategy that explains some of what we see in Chaco during the Pueblo period of time. Because the buildings are just not easily explained. The first people to see them, our friend Simpson, just assumed they were apartment buildings, stuff full of people. I mean, what else would they be? All those rooms? Are you kidding? 600 to 800 in that one building? He didn't know that there was that much, but he could tell. This was a gigantic building. It must have been a village, must have been a town. Maybe not, and we'll get more into that in a moment. So, let me see, did I skip one? I did. I just wanted to show you that. It doesn't have any meaning, except it's beautiful. Stan Honda took that in Chaco. Come out to Chaco on a clear, dark night sky, you might see that. Okay, we'll go on. In the 20s, the big excavation that occurred at Bonito took place over most of that decade by Neo Judd, working for the National Geographic and the Smithsonian. This is their plaque right at the corner of Bonito, put in there in 1957. By the way, this has fallen off too. I don't know what the heck is that. So, and this was a big group. This was the second excavation. The other one lasted 4 years. Very controversial. We can talk about that, but it's not so much a part of this story. But this guy is, because he brought in the motorized division. This is in the 20s, remember? Well, you really want to know the truth. The horse was king almost until the 60s. The people I know who live around Chaco, and people who have lived there on and off, like Gwen Vivian, people like that, they told me, there were still horses until the 60s. In that the people who lived around Chaco and worked in Chaco, they didn't drive in, they rode their buggies or their horses. Up well into the 60s when the change happened. So, you can see what needed to be done. You might think it's different now. This is the North Road. All right? Where are those horses when we need them? There's a South Road too. You might think that's better. But then the rescuer needs rescuing. So Chaco is still remote. What's that? It is Dabney. It's the archaeologist Dabney. She left a couple of years before I did. She was there a couple of years before I was, so she was a great source of most of the information that I got in my early days. So we're going to take a look at Bonito now itself. Here's what it looked like the first year of excavation. If you look carefully, you can see some rooms that had been dug. But this was their first year. They did it for 4 years. They got shut down, became controversial. We don't need to get into all of that, but it was the beginning. A lot of their stuff they shipped back east. American Museum of Natural History got most of that. Here's the Bonito you will go and see today. And it's not even all of it, as you will see in a moment, but it's the excavated part. Very huge, gigantic building, no question about it. Now, this I find fascinating. If you look at that carefully, you go to Chaco and you hear about the buildings and you walk around and you see them. You see King Plateau, and if you go out to Wajiji, and it just seems like a lot of really big buildings. But look, there are only really 3 in the canyon now. This is just in the canyon. That took most of the time while they were there to construct. Only 3. The others all come later and end earlier. Some of them don't even last 100 years. show very little evidence of being used. King Pletzel, Wajiji, you can go to those sites. And they'll look just like Bonito, except smaller, of course. But you won't notice the difference. It just tells you something about the behavior of the people. So what we don't see is them coming in and in 20, 30 years building all the buildings. It's very different. It evolves over time, slowly. There's the beginning of Bonito. Notice the dates now, because the dates are important. Okay, 850. Yeah. It may have been a little earlier, but that's what we can show in the dendrochronology to be true. Small building, and notice its orientation. It's kind of got a soft orientation towards the southeast, towards the winter solstice. I like that. I don't know if it means anything, but I like it. Here's the next phase, the second phase. Now it's looking a little more like our standard Bonito that we all know and love today. It's got an enclosed plaza. It's still got that kind of to the southeast, however. All right, and notice 1040. It's 105 years after the one before. So they built this. I don't know how long it took them, but it didn't take them all the time that we've got there. And then it lasted. Not much changed until 1040. Now we're talking about a huge burst in Chaco of the great houses, and the ones outside the canyon too, that started getting modified as well and added to. Now this next one is amazing to me. Wow. Look, I remember in the 60s when they were doing legitimate studies on LSD. They would give it to animals and then see their behavior. They gave it to spiders, and then they looked at the web that they created. That's what I see here. Oh my God. Can this really be a building that was structured in such a way that all of this was pretty much used at the same time? I mean, walls running into things, over things, on top of that, it's crazy. But there's a special item here that now makes its way into the Chaco architecture. This wall right here. It became more elaborate. It runs perfectly north-south. Not yet do we see in there the part of the architecture that runs as precisely to the east-west. The cardinal directions. Suddenly, boy, everything is focused on the cardinal directions. Everything is erected with cardinal visions in mind, or cardinal directions. And it becomes an obvious change. Here's more of the Bonito that we see today. We see what's been excavated. All of that actually has been excavated, but then all of this was filled back in. Neil Judd did that. Were they going over to Chaco Canyon? What is that? We don't know for sure. Now, this is the last building phase that's considered part of the Chaco phenomenon. That's a phrase that used to be used all the time. Not so much anymore, but I use it, so I'm using it now. So that's the end of that period. But Bonito doesn't stop. Something happens. Is this somebody else? We believe by this time a lot of the people have left. And this is at the height of Mesa Verde. Are some of the Mesa Verdeans coming down and doing stuff here in the buildings? Possibly. Were they related to the people? Did they speak the same languages? Did they have all the same traditions? Questions we do not know. There's so much we don't know about the people. Part of that is not a bad thing, but we'll get to that. There are the building phases. That will make you go blind if you try to sort that out. I consider this a kaleidoscope, and I actually think of Bonito quite often as a kaleidoscope. All right, but you know about the things that were found there. The mundane things, clothes, sandals, the fancy pottery that we hear about. The cylindrical vessels with the cacao. We all love that. One of the best things to have happened in Chaco for years. All kinds of of ceramics, certainly. I love that one on the left. We think it's a badger. I know several badgers in Chaco. I've had very interesting conversations with some of them. And they're just these fascinating things. I wonder what the lid looked like. Some say it was a duck's head. I don't know why they say that, but an archaeologist thought that. The famous jet frog, found the first year of the excavations in 1896, and then it disappeared. The people involved in that excavation were going to take all the people who were helping them, the native people, and question them hard. Maybe, force something out of them. They didn't have to. They just waited until it was for sale somewhere in the area. Because you knew it was going to go for sale right away, right? So you just kept your eyes open and it came back. Turquoise. I sometimes think that whatever their name for Chaco was might have been their word for turquoise. I'm going to make two what seem like contradictory statements, and they're both true. More turquoise was found in one room in a burial in Bonito than has been found in all the rest of the southwestern archaeological sites put together in one room. And it wasn't the only turquoise found in Bonito, as you'll see in a moment. So, one of the dynamics that seems clear is that mostly Chaco was a consumption center where people would come for large gatherings and bring in what they needed. And they would go away again. The one exception to not going out is turquoise. Everything else came in. So did turquoise, but the turquoise went out. The vast majority of the turquoise that was processed in Chaco has gone out. Maybe as much as 90%. And yet what was left over in that one room? I mean, think about that. Turquoise. Spanish came looking for gold. I like turquoise better. And it's beautiful. And these are tiny, tiny. And they drilled them all. It's like there were thousands and thousands of these, and collected in barrels and taken back to New York. Out of that one room. One of the famous necklaces that we almost got it in Chaco. Almost got it in our exhibit, but didn't quite work out. This was found by Neil Judd in the 20s. So here's our bonito. Now you can't read all the numbers, they're tiny little numbers. Well, maybe you can, I don't know. Some of you probably have better eyesight than I do. They were all numbered by Neil Judd. We still use it, it's a simple categorization. Okay? Where was stuff found in Bonito? Well, not in any of that. Not a single thing found in any of those rooms. Not a thing. And look, most of the round rooms, what we call kivas. Were they kivas? Was that proto-Greek kiva at Shibakashi? Is that what that was? Or was it just a meeting place that they needed? And it kind of morphed into kivas. We can't tell you, so we don't know. Were there kivas at Shibakashi? I have been told by a Hopi elder, all these small ones over here, none of these are kivas, he said. Might be special rooms, but they're not big enough. Can't dance in them. All the small ones he was talking about. So we don't know. Call it a kiva, and you've already made an interpretation. All right. What do we have there? I have to look carefully to see this. This is parrots and macaws. Okay? That's where they were found. They had the live bird in Chaco, the connection to the south. Yeah, there's turquoise. I want to point out one room. Yeah, shows up well here. You see this number 33, and it goes up to that little room right up there. All right, the smallest room you can see there, practically. One of the first rooms. And that's where the high status burials with all of that turquoise was found in that room. We'll talk a little bit more about that room in a few moments. This is the jet, like that jet frog that I showed you, made out of that. Here we have cylindrical vessels and copper bells. Also from the south, the copper bells. The cylindrical vessels are very unique to Chaco. I think,
There you go.
okay, all right. Let's see what happens here. I don't know if I've got a short happening. Anyway, the cylindrical vessels, it has been said a little over 200 have been found in the prehistoric Southwest, 111 in one room of Bonito. In fact, it's a room just in front of that room 33, called room 28. All right, we'll do our best. Okay, let's see what happens here. Keep going. What else did they find in Bonito? Here we have fossil shells. They'd actually dig the shells sometimes out of the sandstone. And they also had regular shells, conch shells from the Pacific coast and the Gulf of Mexico. Those, I think. Is that what they do? Yeah, that's it. Okay, shells. So we're looking at all this stuff that came out of these rooms. What is it telling us about the use of the room? Not a whole lot. Were these just stored there? Stored there when they left? Were they being stored there when they were there? Here we have ceremonial sticks. We call something ceremonial when we don't know what it is. And these are very interesting sticks. Most of them are broken, and some of them are very long. Some of them have little eyelets through them. So those of us who are astronomers, we go out there with those sticks and we try to see stars through them, and see, what's this all about, We don't know. Here we have pipes, mostly stone, a few bone pipes also, and maybe other stuff I don't know about. All right, here is projectile points. We would expect to see a lot of those. And again, what is it telling us about the use of the room? Not a whole lot. Here we have worked bone. They made wonderful little elaborate tools like scrapers that then they would have off of a bone, and then they would lay in turquoise around it. So they'd make these artistic tools that were just gorgeous and beautiful. All right, here we have monos and metates. There were a lot in the canyon when I first got there, just kind of in some of the rooms. Eventually we got them out because the smaller ones were walking away. And only a few really big ones did we leave there that we know nobody would be able to get out. What do we have here? Whole bowls. Wow. Whole bowls, not broken, whole bowls. Now, that's not very precise. We don't know what kind of bowls they were. And then this is jar covers. Didn't find the jars, I guess. And then these are rooms that were used in that late period. Let me get out of the way there. Notice most of the round rooms got used during this time frame. Are these the folks coming down from the north? Kind of moving into the building? We do see what seems to be parts of the building that were abandoned to the extent that they were even used for trash from this later time frame. So you had people now who were using the building, but what was their tradition? How aligned was it with the people who built the building? Again, we don't know. Architecture burned in the AD 1100s or later. Were these ceremonial burnings when they left? Certainly some of the traditions in some of the indigenous cultures would agree with that. You destroy it, send it back into the next world. It's not useful here anymore. But they probably had their accidental fires too. And finally, for your viewing pleasure, human remains. Now, again, when I first saw this picture, I just thought, oh my God. I think they have discovered 3 or 4 burials underneath here. There's a great kiva that they had there for a while that they buried. And there's some attendant features to that. So this wasn't full of bodies. And the same was true of all these rooms. And here's our little room 33 up there again. If you're interested in all of that information that came out of this book, Pueblo Bonito. And it was done by a group of us, interpreters. We all kind of pitched in, but it was done by a young man named Landis Erler, who was a seasonal there for about 3 years, and is one of the best interpreters we had. And it was just wonderful that he completed that project. Recent developments have, to my mind, put to rest one debate that really needed to finally go. A few months ago, I encountered a statement that, quote, "The Anasazi have no descendants, they all disappeared," spoken by a specialist in his scientific field. Not an archaeologist, but a well-educated individual. I want to put a shout out to I was hoping he might be here. Larry Ruiz. So we have YouTube content being produced. He's also a YouTube content producer, Larry Ruiz. He does short films about Chaco, and he takes in different researchers, and he'll set them up in the Plaza Bonito, and they'll have a conversation. And they'll talk about certain aspects. They're about 20, 30-minute films each. Well, he's done one, and you can find it on YouTube, and I highly, highly, highly recommend it. It's called Room 33, A View to the Past. Have you seen it, Barbara? Highly recommend it. Rich Friedman, an archaeologist, and well, he's many things, but he's interviewed about Room 33, that little room, all the burials, the high-status burials, and all the turquoise was. Meanwhile, a dear friend of ours from Hopi, named Philip Tuletstoa. Sometime couple of years ago, you may know this, there was a DNA study done on some of the burials out of Chaco that were housed now at the American Museum of Natural History. And it was very controversial because no consultation with the tribes occurred, either from the institutions involved or the researchers. Maybe they thought each other did it, we don't know. Very controversial. But they got the DNA from at least one of those guys in that room. Then one day, one of the researchers, and I don't know if it was the main one, said to our friend, Philip Tuletstoa, "It's kind of too bad we have these now, this ancient DNA, but natives aren't very interested in getting their DNA done." Philip had had his done. So he said, "Well, I'll give you mine." So he did. And they came back. And in the film, you will hear him say, he found out he's related to those guys in room 33. Now, you may know that since that time, the Picaras, another Pueblo group, have had their DNA done. And guess what? Related to those guys in that room, at least one of them. So this is a sea change. This is something that's always been kind of on the haunt. When I first came to Chaco, there was a lot of consternation among natives because we were telling people that they had disappeared. Now, we weren't telling them that, but people previous to us had. It was an old trope that just kind of kept rolling. And the natives just bristled at that. So they were still upset when I got there, even though we didn't say that. But we could never say, we have absolute proof that these people are related. Okay? We don't know about all of them. I mean, Picaras, one person from Hopi. But it's a beginning, and it's a sea change. From the Picaras point of view, when they got word of what was of the study that was done, that made them so proud. They were so proud of that. And they could say to like people at other tribes, "We're proud, but you don't know." Do you want to know? And I hope it keeps happening. But finally, that's done. So one mystery totally solved. Where did the descendants go? And other places too, around the canyon. Here they are. They come back to the canyon. They come back to learn. This is a school group from Acoma and Laguna with their teachers, learning about their ancestors, learning about their traditions. And in the school, they emphasize learning the language, keeping the language alive, That's always, most important. So they come, they do presentations for us, we do swaps with them. They come and they dance at the solstices. This is a Laguna group. And mostly they're young. Some of them, the elders, here's a group from Hopi that came at one solstice. But the young dancers, this is the way they inculcate their tradition and learn how to share it with the rest of the world. What a wonderful thing. The elders come, and this was great. I love this. This is a guy from Hopi. We went to a site with the rock art, and he just exploded with laughter. Now, I don't know much about this, but he said, that's his clan symbol. If you look at it carefully, it's been redone. And some of the rock art in Chaco may still be part of their tradition. We don't know. Jane Colbert, who is our rock art archivist in Chaco, she says it seems like some of these places might still be used. There are some places that historically were photographed, like back in the 30s, and then we look at it today, and there's more stuff on it, and it's not graffiti. It looks like a part of the tradition. It doesn't happen a lot, but we see it occasionally. This was a special day for me. The gentleman on the right, Michael Caboti, he passed not too long after this, and we were just starting to really get to know him. But he came in one day with these other two elders, and it was my job to just take them around. And I was told to take them wherever they wanted to go. They wanted to go down into the deep basement of Bonito, which is a horrible, ugly place. But we got it. We went down in there. They put prayer sticks in different places. We walked around all day. They even looked at one of the archaeological digs that Chip Wills was doing over near Bonito. So I had a long day of conversation with them. And in my time in Chaco, the best times are when I encounter these kind of people that are willing to be there with me in my ignorance and, be okay with my ignorance and tell me certain things. My very first couple of years in Chaco, I had the opportunity to walk around Chaco with a woman from Santa Clara, Rena Switzel. Some of you may know of her, she's gone now. But she'd come back every year, and we'd go out into the canyon, just wander around, look at things. Some places she was looking for. Some places didn't know. Some places she'd ask me about and I could take her, that sounds like maybe this place, and that sort of thing. I learned more from just being with her, walking through the canyon, as to how to feel Chaco, more than in any other way that I can tell you. It's the people. They're the ones. So Michael Caboti was an artist. He's an incredible artist. Here's a part of one of his works. It's beautiful, isn't it? And you don't really see the fullness of it because I couldn't get it all in. There's more to it. And all these symbols. Another part of the same painting. Look at that. Michael Caboti is not an ancient person. He's a modern man, or was when he was here. As are all of the Pueblo people. They are modern people. We tend to think of them, or some of us. We either romanticize the natives, or we say, think of them as more savages, or at least, if we're going to be kind, backward. Right? Backward. No. They live in the modern world, and they have important messages for us. People still come to the canyon to go to the equinox sunrises and the summer solstice and the winter solstice sunrise. We go out to the sites. Ring Granada stands in for summer and both equinoxes. We go over to King Quetzal for winter. So here we have people who come in. They come for short stays. They come and they do a celebration of some kind. They come for some feeling, and then they go away again. And then more people can come. And they come from all over the world. It doesn't matter. The canyon, the dynamic, is what it was 1,000 years ago. Now, we call it a national park. We don't know what they called it. We're not a tribal people, in this room. Well, I shouldn't speak for anybody here, but I'm not. The people from Chaco, a little bit different in that way. I consider Chaco to be an elder. Now, if you have an elder in your family or anywhere, you don't consider them just of the past. Now, in our culture, it gets a little difficult. Older people are thought of as, outlasting their usefulness, perhaps. But we still think of them as alive today. Not as spry, not on top of it the way they were before, maybe. But they're still here. They have deep memories. That's what Chaco is. It's a place of deep memories and something else. Mechanisms that are still functioning. I'll let you read that if you like. They put in clocks and calendars. They put in compasses. You want me to read it? Okay. All right. I might tear up. Sorry. Okay. They come as pilgrims, have been coming for thousands of years to stand in ancient footprints, to see the sunrise that marks the solstices and equinoxes. What draws them here is the pilgrim's way, the thirst to appear in the world, or to feel the true fit of their place in the world, or to finally know the world as their deepest selves, and to continue to breathe the world into being. Whatever their reasons, the sun rose on us all. It's the thing I miss the most, going to the sunrise things with the visitors. There's the final future of Chaco. It can be our future. What's alive in Chaco is a reflection of an understanding of how to live appropriately in the world. Now, the Chacoans may have forgotten it. They may have lost their way. Some say they did. They got too big for themselves. And so they had a lot of infighting, a lot of people leaving, all that kind of stuff. I had a Hopi man tell me once, we were called out into the plaza. He was talking like he was there 1,000 years ago. And we were told we're leaving. So we have three choices. We can tear down everything, send it back into the next world. Okay? We can spruce it up. What shall we do? I guess that's two things, isn't it? Well, there was a third thing. And he said, this is what we decided to do. We tore half of it down and totally destroyed it. Left the other half for the future. Because, he said, we didn't know we might be that future. It's thought that some of the people, if not all, at different times over that 300-year period of building the buildings, they may have left for seasons or two. I've been in the canyon and boy, it's sparse. Nothing grows, nothing. No rain, nothing at all. And then the next year in the flood, So they may have gone. Because remember, if Shibikashi and that period of time was a single settlement, that's how they were doing it. And so when they got to Chaco, it looks like, okay, now everybody's sedentary. Absolutely, we don't move now. Look at these buildings, we can't carry these things, Just like the tools that they used to leave on the trail because they knew that where they were going they could make new tools and they didn't have to carry these. These were people who knew all these little intricate strategies. And because of that, they are still here. Because of that, these people know how to live. They know the seasons are a part of who they are. And if we don't tune into the seasons, as a people, we'll die. So I think Chaco's a portal. You can go there and stand in those places. See what they saw. The world has changed very little in Chaco. And I hope it stays that way. I don't believe it will, but I hope it stays that way. So finally, I just want to thank you very much for listening to all of this. I hope it serves you. I hope that you go to Chaco. That's number one. If you don't, I tell this to people all the time when I'm in Chaco and I'm giving a tour. At the end of the tour, I'll say, now, I'll ask how many have been there before, and I'll get a few hands. And I'll say, all right, if you come to Chaco and you never come back, there's something seriously wrong with you. So the people who raise their hands, they're off, they're fine. The other people are on point. And so all of you who haven't been to Chaco, I'm telling you, you have to go to Chaco. You just have to. Just go drive through it in a day. I mean, make it easy on yourself, but go. Step out of the vehicle and watch the sunlight for about an hour. Maybe you'll find some shade, maybe you won't. Get a feel for the rhythm of the place. It's not easy to do as a day tripper. But once you do, Chaco affects you in ways it's quite surprising. And there are people, I have to say, who cannot be in Chaco. It's spooky, it's weird. We've had people get up in the middle of the night after they've been there like for just about a week. This happened to 3 students that we had years ago. And they split because it was a spooky place. And it was like 5 days later, their professor calls us and says, well, he apologized and said they just got freaked out. They could have talked to us, but maybe they were freaked out about us. I don't know. Anyway, thank you all very much.
Yeah, well, I just asked, the way you had the dates and everything, was that really continually occupied there?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? We don't know. We see the dates between this period of time and this period of time that Bonito was built. Starts in 850, it finishes in, well, even 1250 almost, okay? But was it being built all the time? Probably not. The dendro dates will tell us, and there are spurts of building phases. My question is, I would like to know if all the building phases spurted at the same time, at least in the canyon, and I haven't been able to find that out.
I wanted to ask about the copper bells. I don't remember ever hearing about copper bells being there, and I'm wondering where might they be stored? And
Those are probably
do you
in
know
the.
what they look like?
Those are probably in the American Museum of Natural History. Do we have some in the Hibbon? Yeah, I don't think so. Okay. They came in.
Oh, little teeny ones.
No, they're very small.
Oh, yeah.
Teeny weeny.
They're very small. They're the things that they hooked to their arms and their legs when they dances.
Yeah.
You see them today, except they're not usually copper anymore. But yeah, they came from the south. They were not metallurgists in Chaco. Yes.
In these hundreds of rooms, what were the different ways that they would navigate through the rooms? I didn't see corridors in the plans.
Yeah, we could look at the architecture and all the rooms and all that. Typically, there are corridors, but there's a huge number of rooms that you just step through into another room. And in the eastern corner, there's a whole bunch of rooms that are lined up so that you get the doorways, like 5 or 6 doorways going through this. It's not really a corridor, it's room after room after room, but it kind of feels that way. But the thing is, when you look at that section of the building and you imagine it having a roof, you wouldn't see. Those rooms that go through those doors, they don't even have walls to the outside. You've got rooms on both sides of those. You could not see unless you had a torch. And that would have been eating up the oxygen. We have no evidence that they had torches through there. So what was that about? It's interesting, don't know. Even in the daytime, it would have been dark. Yes?
How much overlap is there in color-coded rooms that's found with various materials in? I mean, the rooms weren't exclusively for the material, one particular material, were they?
He's asking if those rooms that had the different material in, were they rooms that just had those particular, no. They had other things too. If you really looked at the overlay, you would see that sometimes there was jet in where the turquoise, you know, that sort of thing. But it was separated out. But it doesn't tell us what the rooms were used for. You know, if the idea when they left was to close up everything, clean it out, take everything away in places, not giving us any clues as to all how it was used, those seem like weird people to me. You know, you're leaving, you're going somewhere. You know, you may think about coming back, and that's a possible part of it too, because it's not uncommon. You go 100 miles in that direction because you're not getting any rain here, but your cousin's down there. It's just enough difference. It's really amazing in the canyon. Just outside the canyon, it is wetter and warmer than the canyon. The canyon is drier and colder than outside, even 25 miles, just getting up and out of the canyon. And it can be considerably different, and especially with rain. We hear about rainstorms outside and nothing in the canyon, or vice versa. Yeah. I was once trapped in Bonito because of a rainstorm that was only over Bonito. It was just amazing. It lasted about 20 minutes. We had lightning and everything when we came out, and you know, you could look 100 yards up that way and there was no rain, there was no wetness, but it was all on top of us. So we had a covered room to hide in, and that was good.
What is the estimate of the total number of rooms in Bonito?
In rooms in Bonito, it usually says 600 to 800 rooms. We don't know what the upper rooms were like, really. Yes, I saw a hand back there.
Yeah, what's the latest speculation on the maximum population? Because we've heard that
It's
number
tough.
is smaller than it used to be.
Yeah. You know, again, those first populations, just estimates, were based on room counts. And archaeologists, at least in the Southwest, have a criteria they use for population sometimes, and that is room size. And I don't know what the formula is, but certain number of room size, you get 2.3 people or something like that. It doesn't work in Bonito. Some of the biggest rooms just seem like they were never used. There's not a lot of hearths in the rectangular rooms. And if you're gonna live in one of those rooms, you better be able to keep warm in the winter, if that's what that room is used for. All the round rooms have hearths. But kivas today have ceremonial fires, of course. So we don't know what that was. Yes?
On Chimney Rock, I had a young man from Pueblo Zia. He was probably 17 or 18. Had a great conversation with him. But he said, we were talking about the fact, like Lexington and others talked about, that there were connections all over North America. They all knew about it. And he said, well, yeah, you know, they came here. Do you think there's a possibility that people like from Mexico or from somewhere else came to Chaco?
Well, there's very little question that some people from Mexico did. Those high status burials, they have certain features that were more common in the South. And they were taller than the average person. Now, I say that. There might have been somebody in another room somewhere that hasn't been tested and looked at, and they may be taller. You know, we don't know. But because so little has been done, Deputy Ford once told me less than 1% of the great houses have been dug. Now she meant outside the canyon as well. Less than 1%. So any generalization we make from such a little amount of information, that's tough to say. What we see here in Bonito was happening at Beniola also, or up at Chimney Rock. They're the same, you know, going on the same. We don't know, can't tell. Everything is so unique. But Bonito, by any standards, is overdone and underused. It's not a place comfortable entirely with utility only. There's something else going on. And of course, in cultures where they gather together, they usually do have other things than just the utilitarian ideas that keep them together. People ask what their religion was like. Well, the best I can tell you is go to the feast days of the Pueblos. You'll see a lot of similarities, you'll see a lot of differences. And if you talk to the people, they'll tell you certain things about the symbols that they're, showing, and some of the dances, and what they're about, and all of that. But there's enough differences between each ceremonial time and each village to tell us that Chaco Canyon, or let's say Penasco Blanco, because it was started at the same time as Bonito, those could have been two totally different clan systems and languages. We just don't know. That's the problem, because the four language groups of the Pueblo people that are related to Chaco, those four language groups are unrelated. They could not have come anywhere near to what they are now in a mere 1,000 years. They were speaking other languages at the time. There is an archaeologist who thinks that it was Terrace was the main language of our English, but that there were interpreters, and there were people who spoke all the languages, just like today. So Chaco has something to offer us in the modern day, and that's what I feel is the real important message. And I can't tell you what it has to offer you, but if you go, you'll find something. And it might scare you. I will tell you, in my time in Chaco, the very worst things that have ever happened to me have happened there. Not somewhere else when I was gone, but in Chaco.
Can you give one example?
One example? My wife died there. That was the worst thing. And the best things. She was the reason that I got to Chaco. She saw that my life before I was becoming, I was working in a mental hospital. I don't know. This is some kind of autobiographical thing. I was working in a mental hospital in Albuquerque, and she told me, you're bringing the job home. I'm a white male of this generation, and of course I denied. For months I denied, but I started falling in love with Chaco. And I started telling my wife about, we went there together too sometimes, and about the people I was meeting in Chaco, about Bonnie Winslow. Bonnie Winslow was the head ranger and the supervisor of interpretation and the volunteer for the volunteer coordinator. And so my wife said, you ought to go to Chaco and spend the summer. Well, I was still in total denial, but boy, was I going to jump at that. I'd been going up to Chaco over and over again. And so I called Bonnie and we set up a time. She had to call me 2 weeks before I was going and saying, we don't have housing. Housing is always the issue in Chaco. We lost your housing. I don't know how you lose housing, but it happens. So I said, I'll camp. I was totally desperate. It just jumped out of me. I wasn't sure what I was saying at the time. I'm not sure I had a tent even at that time. And she said, okay, we'll try that campground hosting thing that everybody else is doing. So I was the first campground host in Chaco. That's one of my great legacies. I want that on my tombstone, except that I don't plan on having a tombstone. The first campground host in Chaco. So I went, and I was there for the summer in a tent. Got flooded out, had all the stuff that happens that you like to tell stories about living in the wilderness, But I was the liaison between the visitors and the Park Service. Boy, was that a pleasure. Was that a privilege. I had a radio, so if we had an emergency at night, all of that. But that was just wonderful. At the end of that season, what was I going to do? Because I had to tell my wife, I can't go back to that hospital. You were right. And so she said, I know. And she handed me an application to be a seasonal volunteer, a seasonal ranger in Chaco. Well, seasonal park ranger. And I chose Chaco, of course. And the next year, that's what I did. So from 1988, spending a summer in the campground, all the way through about 1997, every season coming back for 6 months, living there, and then I became a permanent. So it's my spiritual home, and I'd love to share it with you. We should quit. People have to go home and eat, and things like that. Thank you.